Hello, this is Jerry Morton. Welcome to my Finding My Way podcast. This is podcast number 22, titled Pat Sisson. Pat Sisson is a story from my adult years. The collection of stories I have written and am reading to you cover many subcultures in our country that I have interacted with from my childhood to my adult and senior years. A more extensive introduction to the Finding My Way stories takes place in the beginning of Podcast 1. Regardless of which podcast you are listening to, you will find the story both entertaining and worthy of your reflective thoughts concerning its contents. The stories, as a collection, provide insights into a span of time that has played a role in shaping American culture and influencing its future. The stories provide you with a sense of admiration for the culture's collective courage and our country's commitment to justice and its optimistic willingness to address new challenges. Pat Sisson. My internal life was in complete chaos. To my astonishment, the Friday late afternoon confirmation of Melba's Monday prediction that a young child would be brought to me to bless on Friday had come true. Added to that was Melba's unexplainable accuracy of past and current events in my life and my inner thoughts about them. It was too much. My concept of reality did not account for Melba's explanation of my life's events, her statements about past lives, or her suggestions to pray for and to prepare for future events. Since I could not empirically explain how Melba knew the facts about my life, my house, and the future, I had to seriously consider her inexplicable knowledge of these things. To do that meant risking being considered a wacko. The people I valued would consider me to have become disassociated with reality if I started to suggest I actually believed that she had acquired this knowledge psychically. I could not. I would not deny what had happened. I had to be true to what I thought was the truth, no matter the consequences. There was more to the reality of our existence, my existence, than I had ever imagined. I did not know what else was out there, in what other dimensions we humans functioned. But they were there. I had to find the truth. Simply denying what Melba had so dramatically demonstrated to me would not bring me to the truth. There was no choice. I had to investigate the world of psychic phenomena with intensity. Naturally, I recontacted Melba. I knew that she worked at a major institution in the Knoxville area, but I didn't know what role she played in that organization. I learned she had a doctorate degree and was the assistant director of a multi-million-dollar project. Her employers did not know of her psychic endeavors. If they did, they would probably sever her relationship with them. I thought it was a big risk for Melba to reveal her psychic gifts. In the several times I met with Melba after that first telephone conversation, I could not discern that she was ever as dramatically accurate again in her predictions as they related to me. In some cases, her answers to my questions about immediate concerns of mine simply did not make sense. Our informal study group met with Melba on several occasions for lunch. The other members had the same reaction to her during those discussions as I did. She seemed to speak in generalities concerning questions asked of her. It wasn't that she was not accurate. Rather, it was like talking to an old friend asking for advice. The friend would reassure you that you were doing okay and end up confirming what you had already decided to do about a specific situation. We all agreed that she was more accurate than wrong in her statements about situational outcomes. It was just the fact that she could have come up with the same information from studying the facts of the situation and reaching a logical, good guess. We became members, my wife and I, of the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the Edgar Cayce Foundation. I began sending off for copies of the original transcripts of the Edgar Cayce readings and devouring them. Trips to the local bookstores found me buying lots of paperback books on psychic encounters. Then I remembered Vivian. She was the bedridden psychic who liked to sip Southern Comfort. Vivian had given me a reading about 2 years ago that had seemed so fantastically impossible that I had dismissed her from my mind. At the time of the reading, I had a number of academic hurdles to accomplish that would take several years to complete. Vivian had said that by a year from her reading, I would have completed all of them and be employed in my specialty area without moving from our house. That set of predictions had no chance of ever happening. My conclusion was that Vivian was a sweet, elderly lady providing some fantastical entertainment. Well, all of her predictions for that year had come true. My dismissal of that reading was so complete that it wasn't until the overwhelming impact of Melba's first reading for me had set in that I remembered Vivian's reading. I revisited Vivian several times after my dramatic encounters with Melba. Those visits with Vivian were pleasant but not dramatically life-changing. They were like my lunch meetings with Melba. I received reassuring advice concerning the stressing issues of the moment, but nothing more dramatic than those a good friend would give in support of me as a person. It was true that neither Melba nor Vivian had the detailed information about my life situations that my close friends had. Both women had minimal background information on me. It was unusual that these two psychics could focus on my issues and provide supportive statements that fit the situation. I grew to consider both these unusual women to be friends. Melba moved away from the region a year or two after her telephone reading for me. I lost contact with her, as did many others who valued her as a kind and caring person who happened to have a gift. Vivian died about 10 years after my first meeting with her. She was a wonderful character in the community. It seemed that anyone who was seeking to know more about psychic phenomena knew of Vivian. To my surprise, a large number of well-educated people in the area were seriously exploring psychic issues. They did so discreetly, as the mainstream culture of the region was quite hostile to the concept of psychic phenomena. City ordinances made it illegal to give psychic readings. Gradually, I became a member of the area's underground community committed to exploring the reality of psychic phenomena. There were individuals among this group who clearly had psychological problems, family issues, and interpersonal relationship issues they sought to solve through a psychic's advice, who would have been better off seeing a licensed professional than a psychic. However, a number of people whose lives seemed to have only ordinary difficulties, so-called normal people, appeared to be exploring psychic phenomena for their own development. I use the term normal people with a bit of humor, as I have found it difficult to define what a normal person is, let alone find one who fits any definition of normal. One of my fellow psychic researchers, whom I had met in the Unitarian Church of all places, told me about a woman who would be presenting on her psychic abilities at the local university's student center before long. I was surprised that the university would allow such an event. My informant said that it was part of an evening series of presentations on a wide range of topics, sponsored through some extracurricular lecture series. The students themselves coordinated it, she thought. I decided to go. The lecture room was packed with people. Tables and chairs had been moved to the four sides of the large room. People filled the seats, sat on the tables, sat on the floor. Scattered among the college students were older adults and gray-haired ones. It was clear that I should have arrived earlier if I were to sit on a chair or on a table. As it was, I found a spot on the floor directly in front of a table full of college students seated on it. This suited me just fine, as I was a little self-conscious about being there. I just wanted to blend in, hoping to be unnoticed. As we all waited the appointed time for the psychic to make her presentation, the room was full of friendly conversations, all going on at once among the attendees. In the crowd was an air of excited anticipation. I kept looking for the psychic. I thought she would appear probably dressed as a gypsy or some other culturally different garb. Finally, two middle-aged women walked into the center of the room. They could have been clerical staff at the center, or they could have played some role in the organization of the event. Their dress and general appearance were in no way unusual. One of the ladies held up her hand for the crowd to be quiet. They responded. She said how happy she was to see such a large turnout for one of their program's non-credit lecture series. Then she gave the titles and dates of future lectures that would be presented in coming weeks. With no further ado, I'd like to introduce Pat Sisson, a psychic, she said, and raised her hand in acknowledgement to the woman standing beside her. Pat has begun a path of psychic discovery which has resulted in the development of unusual abilities that some refer to as psychic abilities. Pat, please share with us some of your experiences. Polite applause greeted Miss Sisson as she turned to the hostess. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this group tonight. Then Mrs. Sisson began telling her story of discovery. She started by explaining that it all began when she picked up a Ouija board by chance that was lying around the house. To her surprise, it started to spell out answers to questions she had formulated in her mind. The answers made sense. Some of those answers were given to questions about events to happen in the future for her and her family. To her surprise, the answers proved to be correct. This captured her attention, and she continued to experiment with the Ouija board. She had always been a practicing Christian, she explained. She was raised outside Paris, Kentucky, in the Christian church. The Christian church, also called the Disciples of Christ, was the church that Edgar Cayce belonged to. She stated she didn't want to be involved with anything that would conflict with the beliefs of the church, but felt that the answers she was receiving through the Ouija board were compatible with those basic teachings. Since Edgar Cayce was a psychic who spent most of his life giving psychic readings to people and was a member of the Christian church, she felt even more comfortable about it. Pat related that she felt that as long as Christ was acknowledged as the source of all information, the way one got the information was not important. That was the way she thought Edgar Cayce dealt with the phenomena he had experienced, and that was the way she was dealing with it. Before long, she started to hear a voice speaking to her when she approached the Ouija board. She was initially frightened by the experience, considering the possibility that she was becoming mentally ill. The voice assured her that such was not the case. She had been asking the voice questions like those she had asked the Ouija board. The answers proved helpful and supportive of her Christian heritage. As this process rapidly progressed, the voice told her that he was Fleeman of the blue-green ray. When her work in the hotel industry presented her with challenges, she began asking the voice, Fleeman, for answers to her problems. The answers were helpful. As this process progressed, she reported that she began to be able to read other people's thoughts. She didn't want to walk in other people's spaces, so she would only allow herself to get inside other people's mind talk when they gave her permission to do so. Remarkably, she found people coming to her and asking for advice. The answers to their questions would suddenly come to her mind. She would provide the answers that came to her. Often, those answers included other related information that demonstrated the relevancy of the answer or put the answer into a greater context of the individual's life. This information would astonish the questioner, as there was no possible way for Pat to have known that information. Pat Sisson's presentation lasted about an hour. She provided the audience with many detailed examples of her giving someone information about themselves that no one could have known without an intimate knowledge of that person, and the amazing accuracy of the predictions she often made to individuals about their lives. She said that she was unsure where all of this was going, but she had learned to trust her guide. She was still in the learning process as she tried to understand and live with her developing abilities. Then she said that she would demonstrate what she meant when she said that she could pick up information about people if they allowed her to do so. She seemed to be looking all around the room at people, trying to decide from whom to pick up the psychic vibrations, when suddenly she pointed at me. You have been stressed about your business accounting course. You have a major exam coming up later this week. It is critical to you that you do well. You are particularly concerned about— I didn't understand the terminology she used because this wasn't my field of study. You do not need to worry. You will do well on the exam. You will be very pleased with the results. Does that make sense to you? I was in total chaos. I did not want to be singled out before this group. I was not a student taking accounting courses. None of this made sense to me. No, ma'am, it makes no sense to me at all. I'm not even a student here. Oh, said the startled Pat. There was a long moment of silence in the room. A voice directly above me broke the silence. It was a guy sitting on the table directly behind and above me. I can help here. It fits me to a T. I am a business major here, and I do have an accounting examination on Friday. I am concerned about doing well on it because I don't feel I fully understand the— and then he used the same term that the psychic had used. As I said, you will do well on it. She turned and addressed someone else in the same manner. I could not follow what was said because of my emotional turmoil. I did not want to be a focus of the group's attention. It was embarrassing to me. It deeply upset me that this woman made statements about me that were totally untrue, but were true for the person directly behind and above me because she seemed to have derived the information psychically. I was simply too busy with my thoughts to follow any more of Pat Sisson's demonstrations. As the session came to a close, Miss Sisson said that anyone who wanted to talk with her in greater detail about her psychic experiences could call her. She would be glad to meet with anyone interested in the topic. I wrote down her phone number. I'd like to talk with her. Something real was taking place with this woman, and I wanted to know more about it. Perhaps she would be willing to meet with our informal psychic investigation group. I did call Pat and make an appointment to meet with her at the hotel she worked in one evening the following week. That week, she was serving as the night manager. Her infant daughter and husband would be in a room adjacent to the room we would meet in, if that wouldn't bother me, she said. The meeting was set. Half expecting to get some kind of reading from Mrs. Sisson, I went into the meeting with some trepidation. What if she said that something bad was going to happen to me, or at my work, or for someone I valued? Would I believe it? Would I take unusual precautions? Would I start becoming a fanatic follower? I just didn't know what to expect. The meeting with Pat ended up being nothing like I had anticipated. Almost all of our meeting time was consumed with Pat's relating in great detail her fears and self-doubts concerning the development of her psychic abilities. Just about the time she started to feel comfortable with some abilities, some other highly unusual psychic phenomena would start to happen to her, which produced new challenges to her belief system. I found myself reassuring her that her fears and doubts were totally understandable. I shared my encounters with Melba, the professional with a doctorate, and Vivian, the Southern Comfort sipper. I knew that there was something going on that none of us could explain and encouraged Pat to continue her development in this area. It was important work. Just because we could not fully understand the phenomena was no reason to deny the truth of its reality. Our problem was not the phenomena, but how to explain them and our fear of the unknown. Once a phenomenon was independently verified, we knew it to be real. We just didn't know why it existed or was being manifested as it was. The meeting ended with Pat enthusiastically agreeing to meet with our investigative group. The time and date were set. We would meet at Pat's house, as she would have to be with her infant during the time we met. As it turned out, most of the members of our investigative group who could meet with her for the scheduled meeting had completed their doctoral programs. Our group ended up sitting on the floor facing Pat as she explained how she read palms. Each one of us had our palms read. She could hit on some interesting facts that all of us knew about each other, but there was nothing in her statements that was overly astonishing. It was curious that she could tell us things we knew about ourselves that she could not have known. One member of our group had been practicing as a school psychologist and held a senior-level administrative position in a nearby school system. He kept asking where she had gone to college. She was a little evasive in answering the question. My friend kept pressing her. I was puzzled as to why he was doing this. It was clear that she didn't really want to answer the question. He continued to press for an answer. Finally, Pat said she had gone to Transylvania College in Lexington, Kentucky. Her answer didn't satisfy him, as he asked what year she had graduated. She said that she had had to withdraw from the college due to a financial hardship at the time. Then went on to say that she felt humbled to be in the presence of so many PhDs. My friend promptly responded, "Look at who is sitting at your feet, trying to learn from you. We are humbled to be in your presence." Well, that about summed it up. We had found someone with a gift we did not understand, but we could not deny the results of the gift. After meeting with our group a few more times, Pat suggested that she could channel Fleeman, her guide, at our next meeting. That made me uneasy all over again. I had just gotten comfortable accepting that some people clearly have what is commonly called psychic abilities. I could accept that, although I didn't announce it to the general world. I still didn't feel comfortable imagining having everyone who knew me discuss what I was exploring and have them question my emotional stability. Now, I was actually going to attend a seance. It seemed to me that normal people could not seriously entertain the idea that a seance could produce something worthy of belief. Such events could only be fraud or the product of someone's imagination. However, I was not going to let my prejudices interfere with my exploration for the truth. I was going to attend the channeling session. Pat began the session by sitting cross-legged on the floor in the basement family room of her house. She said a prayer asking for God's guidance, and then was quiet for a few seconds. Her two arms started to move as she held a finger to her thumb in each hand and began to move her arms in a synchronized pattern. "I, Fleeman of the 7th blue-green ray, salute you," began the session. Fleeman then went on to explain that he was using Pat's body to speak to us. She would not remember what he said through her. He thanked her for her willingness to be his channel. Rather than providing us with a lot of specific predictions about the future, he spoke in a more philosophical nature about spirit, psychic phenomena, and its role in demonstrating that we are more than three-dimensional beings. Much of what he said was compatible with the Edgar Cayce material I had read. At the end of his self-called soapbox presentation, he said that he would take questions from anyone as long as they were not of a personal nature. Personal questions would be addressed through an individual reading Pat would give to those who wanted one. The Fleeman sessions became a monthly evening event. Word spread that Pat was channeling Fleeman every second Thursday night of each month. Sometimes as many as 30 or 40 people would show up for a Fleeman session. The Fleeman sessions have continued up to the present time. Most of those sessions were recorded. I was a persistent questioner at the end of those sessions. If Fleeman were real, I wasn't about to miss a chance of learning from him. If Fleeman were an extension of Pat's subconscious or some other connection with her psychic abilities, I still wanted to hear what was said. The questioning session at the end of the Fleeman discourse eventually evolved into his asking me if I had a question. I always did. The question would be of a philosophical nature relating to his comments during that session. After responding to my question, he would provide the group with a blessing, and Pat would be herself once again. Another thing that changed with the Fleeman sessions over time was that Pat would remember what Fleeman had said during that session. When that change occurred, Pat announced that she would remember what Fleeman said from then on, just before the beginning of that particular Fleeman session. The only time I can remember that Fleeman addressed a specific personal issue for someone in one of the channeling sessions occurred around the early 1980s. He said that he had gotten off of his soapbox and addressed a question or two about some developing world situation, and was clearly at the closing point of the session when he addressed me directly. "Jerry, your colleague, who is in the hospital, is in an emergency medical crisis right now. You are not to worry about this crisis. At noon tomorrow, the crisis will resolve itself. She will be fine and released from the hospital without any lingering problems." With that pronouncement, Fleeman ended the session. I was stunned. I knew exactly whom he was talking about. She was an original member of our psychic investigative group and was currently working with me as a school psychologist with the Educational Cooperative. She had told me that she was going to take that Thursday off to have some routine elective surgery. She would be back to work shortly after the surgery, as it was such a routine process. There was no need to try to see her at the hospital or make a big deal about her surgery. It was all very routine. I had accepted her explanation and was not concerned. Actually, until Fleeman's comment, I had forgotten about it. It was already too late that evening to call the hospital to confirm what Fleeman had said. I determined that I would call my colleague's close friend, Sylvia, first thing in the morning to confirm Fleeman's statement. If what he said was true, and I could be of any assistance, I planned to take off work to be at the hospital. Around 8:30 the next morning, I reached Sylvia by phone and asked her how our friend was doing. The news was devastating and puzzling. Sylvia said that the initial surgery had gone well. The surgeon had opened her abdomen and completed the surgery without the slightest difficulty. That was in the morning. Early in the afternoon, she began losing a lot of blood. She needed several blood transfusions. They didn't know where the source of the bleeding was. Her loss of blood was massive. It seemed that the transfusions just went through her system almost as fast as they entered it. They decided to open her up again, even though the surgery was considered risky because of her weakened condition. A large quantity of blood had collected in her abdominal cavity, but they could not find the source of the bleeding. In the hope that the blood loss was the result of multiple seepages around all of the stitches, they decided to restitch everything. Late in the afternoon of the surgery, she was still losing blood and receiving transfusion. The restitching had not stemmed the blood loss. At that point, Sylvia said, they were afraid to reoperate, given her weakened condition. She might die on the operating table. As of that morning, she continued to need blood transfusions because of the ongoing loss of blood. If the blood loss did not stop by noon, they were going to open her up again, despite her weakened condition, as her life was on the line. I was stunned. First of all, I was deeply concerned for my friend. This was so unexpected. I was also astounded that Fleeman would know about the situation. How could this be possible? Since he was right about the medical emergency, I hoped that he was also correct about her sudden recovery at noon. After Sylvia told me that there was nothing I could do to help the situation, except to pray, I agreed not to go to the hospital. I told Sylvia that I would call her shortly after noon to get an update on our friend's condition. It was about 12:20 in the afternoon when I reached Sylvia by phone. "It's the most amazing thing. They had decided to operate on her at 1, even though she could die as a result. They made that decision about 11 this morning. They had no choice. When they checked her right at noon, right at 12, all the bleeding had stopped. They are not going to operate. They think she may be able to fully recover. No one can explain what happened. It's like a miracle happened." I was astounded. The entire event had unfolded as Fleeman had stated it would. When Pat gave someone a reading, it lasted for about half an hour. She would have the person requesting the reading shuffle a deck of tarot cards and then make 6 stacks with them. Each stack represented a month, thus providing the seeker with a 6-month reading into the future. The reading was recorded on a cassette tape recorder, and the recipient of the reading would be given the tape. During informal talks at Fleeman sessions, some of the respondents reported remarkable statements from Pat about concerns in their lives and hopeful predictions about how those issues would be resolved. Over time, many recipients of Pat's readings reported that her predictions had been accurate. In my continuing readings about Edgar Cayce, I was surprised to discover that he charged for his readings. Before he became heavily involved in providing people with readings, he was a professional photographer. It was explained that as requests for his readings continued to grow, he had to cut back on spending time working as a photographer. He had a family to support, which forced him to charge a fee for the time he spent giving readings. Eventually, he discontinued his photographic career to spend his working hours meeting the ever-increasing requests for psychic readings. I doubt that he ever turned down a request for a reading simply because someone could not afford to pay. I shared this information with Pat and urged her to start charging for her readings. At that time, the readings were taking up a lot of her family time. She agreed and eventually evolved into providing readings and other related activities on a full-time basis. Often people who had received readings from Pat attended the Fleeman sessions. Before the session would start and after it had finished, they would share some of the remarkable predictions that Pat had made for them that had come true. Those accurate predictions, including statements such as a woman becoming pregnant after having had extensive and unsuccessful assistance medically in that regard, informed a woman that she would find the man she would marry shortly and they would be happily married for 2 years, and stating that a person was about to change jobs unexpectedly and the new position would be highly financially lucrative. The list of her accurate predictions over the years is quite extensive. Pat's readings for me over the years have been accurate on many fronts. However, not all of her predictions seem to come true for me. Some of her predictions did not take place within the time span that she had stated. Other predictions were misinterpreted at the time they were given. Not until time had passed and I had reviewed the audio tape of her reading did I see a connection between what she had said and what had actually happened. Some predictions just have not come true as far as I can tell. All of that acknowledged, There is no denying that Pat's readings have a consistent record of being remarkably accurate when there is no logical, straight-line scientific explanation for that accuracy. In addition to providing readings, Pat began receiving requests for such psychic activities as contacting loved ones who had died, conducting past life readings, and finding lost objects, as well as a host of other related activities. I think that some of the activities were an exploratory effort on Pat's part to learn more about the many areas of psychic phenomena. She was as much a student of psychic issues and discoveries as any other serious, interested party would be. One interesting attempt of a son to contact his recently departed father was verified as being unexplainable in strict scientific terms. In this case, the son was a member of our informal psychic investigative group. At the time of this event, I had considered the individual to retain a reasonable degree of skepticism concerning psychic phenomena. He was highly valued and effective as a psychologist. We all trusted his judgment and his truthfulness. When he went to Pat for her attempt to contact his deceased father, another member of our informal study group went with him. Both individuals have confirmed what happened then. After going into a meditative state, Pat began speaking in Yiddish to the man, requesting her to attempt to make contact with his father. The father was Jewish, as was his son. The son knew what the father was saying. The son's friend did not understand a word of what was said. Therefore, the son requested that his father speak in English. In response to the request, Pat, speaking as the father, spoke his words in English, although the father continued to use the Yiddish nickname he had called his son when he was alive. The son asked his father several questions, which were answered. After this channeling of the son's father, the son reported that no one knew that his father used the Yiddish nickname he called his son except the son. The father used the nickname only when the two of them were alone talking to each other. The son also reported that when the father spoke in Yiddish and English, he related information to the son that only the father could have known. For example, Pat, speaking as the father, told the son that his father was very disappointed that after the father's death, the father's best friend had lied about some joint business dealings they had together. His friend had lied and been very deceitful. In relating this information, Pat named the father's friend. She used the nickname the father had always used in identifying the business partner and friend. Later, the son related that only he, his brother, and his mother knew of the deceitfulness and lies of the father's friend. They had never discussed that situation with others. Pat confirmed that she did not know the Yiddish language. There is no logical explanation for her being able to speak fluent Yiddish during that session, nor was there a way that Pat could have known about the son's nickname, the deceitful behavior of the father's friend, and the friend's nickname or the other factual information she related while in communication with his deceased father. The son concluded that he had actually communicated with his father. Pat's ability to assist someone in finding lost items has been a source of amazement to many. Two quick stories that I confirm as happening related to my personal request for assistance. Our children's hamster had escaped its cage. This was very upsetting to the two children. After searching the house for several days without success, we decided to call Pat and ask her if she was picking up on anything relating to the pet. We feared it had gone outside or died in the house. She said that it was still in the house and we would find it. She said that several months would pass before the hamster was found, but it would be in excellent health. Her prediction was both encouraging and disappointing. As a few months passed, we began not even to think about finding the hamster. One day, my wife opened the drawer immediately under the oven in the stove. We stored nothing in that drawer except the stove's broiler pan, which seldom, if ever, was used. There was the hamster nest with the hamster inside. The creature had gathered dried kernels of corn from the Indian ears of corn we had sitting in a shallow decorative bowl on the floor in the living room. I had noticed recently that kernels of corn were missing from the cob at an increasing rate, but assumed that the children had had something to do with that process. We concluded that the hamster had gotten its water from the defrost drip pan underneath the refrigerator. Pat was right. Another time we had lost a book from the university library. It was an older edition that had some relevant information for a major project my wife was working on. If we didn't find the book, we would have to pay the library for it. That would be expensive. My wife had taken it with us to study on our way down to Atlanta for a visit with our daughter and her young family. When we returned home, we realized that we could not find the book. After a thorough search of the car, our house, and our daughter's house, we had not located it and feared the small-sized book had fallen unnoticed from the car at one of our rest stops. After our fruitless searches, we called Pat. Pat said that we would find the book. She saw it on a bookshelf by a door. We looked at all of the bookshelves we had, including storage bookshelves in the garage and around all of our doors. When we didn't find it, we looked again and again. We just could not find it. The conclusion was that this was clearly one time when Pat was wrong. We decided to go online to a rare bookstore and purchase it. When the book became due, we would just inform the university library of the loss and give them the newly bought book. In the meantime, my wife had the book for her studies. Several months later, our daughter called from Atlanta. She had found the book. Apparently, we had left the book in our youngest granddaughter's room. The book had been placed on the bookshelf located in her room. The entrance door to the room opens into the inside of the room. The bookshelf remains hidden until the door was closed. As a result, it was not constantly in view. As the years passed, our group dispersed across the country as careers continued to develop. We were not trying to convince the world that Pat was accurate, that she knew things that no normal person could know. She constantly demonstrated that psychic phenomena were real. Many of the people who came to the monthly Fleeman sessions had received readings or other assistance from Pat and reported on her accuracy. The explanations for psychic occurrences were dependent upon a person's personal belief system. We also knew that many con artists were taking advantage of others with their claims, predictions, and charges for their services. You could not accept someone as being psychic just because they said they were. Another important point we realized was that we had not found a psychic who was 100% accurate all of the time. You could not give up your sound decision-making abilities just because a psychic, who was sometimes accurate, was telling you to do something that you just didn't feel was right for you. One of the patterns of Pat's gift that I have learned over the years is that she often gets correct information to pass on to those seeking it, but not all of the information that one might need for a quick understanding of a prediction or location of something. I don't know why that is the case. Like everyone else, I am just trying to understand the phenomenon. Pat has become a lifelong friend. Over the years, I have come to the realization that she is seeking understanding of her gifts while she is confronted with the normal problems we all encounter as human beings, raising families, making a living, and finding joy in life. As our parallel search for a greater understanding of the psychic phenomena has evolved, my understanding of spiritual values has grown as well. Along with that growth has come a series of hard-to-understand events.